I'll start by saying it is a shame that it takes a tragedy like what happened last November 26 to focus public attention on this question that directly affects our national security and public safety. So I appreciate the Ben Franklin Fellowship and the Center for Immigration Studies for hosting this discussion and inviting me to help get it started. I want to start with a little background about special immigrant visas in general and the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Program in particular before talking about what the Trump administration is doing to protect our national security and public safety. First, about special immigrant visas. You might be interested to learn that special immigrant visas are nothing new. We've had a provision for special immigrant visas in our Immigration and Nationality Act since 1965. So generally, this is an employment-based immigrant visa category that includes a hodgepodge of subclassifications, including for religious workers, Panama Canal employees, and certain employees of international organizations who resided long-term in the United States. Now, there's also a kind of special immigrant visa for aliens who served the United States government abroad, people like our local staff at embassies and consulates. Now, to qualify for this, you need at least 15 years of faithful service, including under extraordinary circumstances. Also, you have to have been approved by the principal officer of the Foreign Service post. That's usually the chief of mission, the ambassador, or the head of another U.S. diplomatic office abroad. Now, these requirements set a high bar. I can remember at my first post about 20 years ago, one of our local staff who had worked for the U.S. government for well over 15 years hoped to retire to the United States, but she had a lot of difficulty satisfying that requirement for having served under extraordinary circumstances. Now, this is a hard ending for her, but that's the way the program was designed. Special immigrant visa was not designed to be a recognition of time in service or a retirement benefit. Now, turning now to the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Program and how it's different. In 2001, Congress created a special immigrant visa program for a limited number of Afghans who had assisted the U.S. war effort. And over the last 20-plus years, through a series of legislative enactments, the program expanded to cover a broader and broader range of qualifying work. It made available many more visas and extended the application deadlines. So nowadays, in order to qualify for an Afghan special immigrant visa, you must have been employed for 1 year by or on behalf of the United States government or in certain capacities for the International Security Assistance Force. You must have provided faithful and valuable service and have experienced a, quote, ongoing serious threat as a result of that employment. So for the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Program, we can see Congress borrowed the name or concept of the original Special Immigrant Visa Program. But that's where the similarities stop. The criteria are different and much looser. We're talking about 1 year of service vice 15 years of service. Also, that phrase, on behalf of, means we're no longer talking about people who worked directly for the embassy or other U.S. agencies of the U.S. government. Instead, we've opened the door to all sorts of contractors, proxies, and others. And in addition, while the Congress was opening up the program in statute, some of the more important statutory criteria were being watered down administratively. And let me provide a couple of examples about this. So, like the regular Special Immigrant Visa Program, the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Program requires approval from the Chief of Mission. But that Chief of Mission approval authority was delegated to a Washington-based official after our embassy closed in 2021. And obvious problems with this situation. How can somebody in Washington know whether the applicant provided faithful and valuable service when he has no first-hand acquaintance with the applicant or knowledge of the applicant's work in Afghanistan? And recall also, we're talking about contractors who might never have encountered a U.S. government official in their work. All right, what about the claim that we're helping people who are under threat for having helped the U.S. war effort? Well, in 2021, the Biden administration made a blanket determination that all Afghan special immigrant visa applicants are inherently under threat, regardless of whether their employment had ended or if they had relocated outside of Afghanistan. You can see the effect of all this. There's no need for an individual determination, and it doesn't matter whether you're even in Afghanistan anymore. In doing this, the Biden administration essentially gutted that statutory requirement. So putting all this together, you can see how any Afghan who can come up with papers saying he worked for a U.S. government contractor for a year is potentially eligible for an Afghan special immigrant visa. And given the size of the U.S. and allied war effort in Afghanistan, that's thousands of people. And where does that leave us today? Well, for many years, the only potential limits on applications were the number of visas available and the deadline for applications to seek chief of mission approval. And I emphasize potential when I say potential limits because the Congress every year kept increasing the number of visas available and extending the application deadlines. And that was until this last year. The usual attempt to expand those was not successful. The window for chief of mission applications closed December 31st, 2025, and there are only about 5,000 visa numbers remaining now. Now that limits future applications and visa issuance for now. But you can be sure that advocates will do everything possible to reopen the application period and secure more visa numbers for applicants who are already in the processing pipeline, thanks to the loose application criteria I described a moment ago. So who is in the pipeline right now? There's about 120,000 applications for principal applicants pending chief of mission approval. That is, these are applications the State Department has received and hasn't assessed yet. Another 29,000 already have chief of mission approval and are in various stages of visa processing. That is, they're after chief of mission approval, but before visa interview. And to be clear about these numbers, that's just principal applicants. It doesn't count derivative applicants like spouses and children. We won't know the total number of derivatives until the principal applicants get chief of mission approval and get a little later in the visa process. Assuming an average of 2 or 3 children per applicant and a spouse, the total number of individuals implicated here is 4 or 5 times higher. Now that's pretty striking when you consider that since 2001, about 400,000 Afghans have immigrated to the United States, and about 200,000 of them came since 2021 under the Biden administration when they pulled out all stops. Okay, so this situation is pretty clear and it's pretty daunting. Before I get into the part where we tell you about what we're doing about it, I hope you'll indulge my exploring an underappreciated but very important aspect of visa processing. Here I'm going to be a little less disciplined than Congressman Biggs was. This is vetting. I understand you all will have a panel on vetting today. I regret I cannot participate because it presents some interesting questions of epistemology. That is, how do we know what we know when we say we know something? In the public discourse about Afghan special immigrants, we hear constantly about how we know them very well and they're subject to very thorough background checks before they're admitted to the country. Well, as we saw November 26th, that's not good enough. But pretend for a moment that November 26th or any of the other attacks by Afghans who came to the United States had never happened. What does it mean to say that somebody is well vetted? Well, first you need to establish his identity. That is, who is this person standing in front of me if I'm a consular officer? We usually do this using official documents like birth certificates, passports, that sort of thing. But in Afghanistan, state institutions are weak and corruption is high. To put it diplomatically, official documents from Afghanistan are not fully reliable. So when I have this Afghan fellow standing in front of me, how do I know this guy is who he says he is? And Mr. Biggs gave a very interesting example of somebody who essentially changed his identity. All right, now, assuming I can fix the applicant's identity, I have to check it against something, right? In the developed world, I can request a copy of the applicant's police record, or I can check the name with local police authorities to see if he's done anything that might make him ineligible for a visa. It is possible to get a police record in Afghanistan, at least according to our official guidance, but should I rely on it? That takes us back to that question I mentioned before about the reliability of official Afghan documents. I hope the problem is clear now. This is something like going fishing with an unbaited hook in an empty pond. And then when I don't catch anything, I say that fish don't exist. Right? So while I'm musing about fishing in empty ponds, the Trump administration is acting. Immediately following the shooting, the Department of State paused all processing for Afghan special immigrant visas and paused issuance of any visa to anyone traveling on an Afghan passport. Our colleagues at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services took similar steps with the applications they control. In December, the President signed Presidential Proclamation 10098, which restricted the entry to the United States of nationals from a number of countries, including Afghanistan. This was building on his Proclamation 10949 from June. Notably, the December proclamation included two groups not covered by the earlier proclamation: immediate relative immigrants and Afghan SIVs. In conclusion, I'll say what the administration is doing is good and necessary, but I'm concerned it might not be enough. As we've seen in the past, the president's directives can be challenged and modified in the courts. I'm sure advocates for more Afghan immigration in the United States are doing everything possible, both in the courts and on the Hill, to undo what the administration is doing. And that concerns me. We cannot compromise our national security or public safety for any foreign national, ally or not, especially when we cannot properly vet them. The American people must always come first. Thank you.